The first time they laughed, he pretended not to hear it, but he saw it. Caleb Morgan had learned to read faces the way other men read road signs. He saw the lifted brows, the tight smiles, the sideways glances that said everything people were too polite or too cruel to say out loud. He felt 3 small hands squeeze his at the same time. "Dad," Ava signed, her fingers quick and graceful, her dark curls bouncing as she looked up at him. "Too loud?" He swallowed. "Just right," he signed back, forcing a smile big enough for all 3 of them. It was the annual Morgan Industries family reunion, hosted in a sprawling lakeside resort outside Chicago. White tents, polished silver trays, waiters in black vests, and a string quartet playing beneath a chandelier of crystal lights. Caleb hadn't wanted to come, but the invitation had been addressed to him and his daughters, Ava, Aria and Addison, individually. Triplets, 8 years old, deaf since birth. His entire world. He adjusted Addison's pink cardigan and felt the familiar ache behind his ribs. Not shame. Never shame, just fear. The quiet, constant fear that the world would not be kind to them. Across the lawn, his ex-wife stood near the champagne table. Leela, still elegant, still polished, still wearing that expression like she'd tasted something bitter. She hadn't wanted deaf children. The doctors had told them at 6 months. Genetic. All 3. Caleb remembered the hospital room, the silence after the diagnosis. Lila's hand slipping from his. "I can't do this," she'd whispered. He could. He had. 3 years later, she had signed divorce papers faster than she had ever signed "I love you." And now here they were. A reunion she had insisted he attend. For the family's sake, she'd said in a clipped email. He almost turned around at the entrance, but Ava had tugged his sleeve. "Family means we go," she signed carefully. So he came. The whispers started within minutes. "They're all deaf? All 3? That must be exhausting." Poor things. Caleb kept his shoulders straight. He'd worked 2 jobs to afford specialized schooling. He'd learned American Sign Language until his hands cramped at night. He'd sold his truck to pay for hearing aids they rarely wore because they preferred silence to distortion. He didn't need pity. He needed people to see them. Lila approached like a queen surveying a lesser kingdom. "Well," she said loudly without bothering to sign, "this is quite a spectacle." The girls looked at her lips, trying to read them. Ava frowned. Caleb signed the words gently so they would understand. Lila's mouth tightened. "You don't have to translate everything. They should learn to adapt." "They have," Caleb signed firmly, then spoke aloud for her benefit. "The world hasn't." A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. Lila leaned down slightly, her voice syrupy and sharp all at once. "Girls, do you even know what this event is about?" Addison blinked. Caleb signed the question. Aria answered, her small hands steady. "Family celebration." Lila gave a soft laugh that wasn't kind. "It's about business legacy, something you'll never really understand." The words hit like cold water. Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's enough." "Oh, please," Lila said, lifting her champagne glass. "You've sheltered them so much they think silence is a gift." "The world doesn't work in silence, Caleb." He knelt down so he was eye level with his daughters. "Look at me," he signed. "You are strong. You are smart. You are enough." They nodded, trusting him completely. That trust was heavier than anything Lila could throw at him. The music stopped abruptly. A ripple moved through the crowd. At the entrance of the main tent, a black SUV had pulled up. The murmurs grew louder. "That's him!" "Is that really?" Caleb followed the direction of their stares. Stepping out of the vehicle was Daniel Reed, CEO of Reed Technologies, billionaire, philanthropist, known across the country for turning a small startup into one of the largest accessibility software companies in the United States. Caleb had read about him once, especially the article about how his younger brother had been deaf. Daniel Reed rarely attended social gatherings unless there was a charitable cause involved. Why he was at the Morgan reunion, Caleb had no idea. Lila straightened instantly, smoothing her dress. The host rushed forward to greet him. Cameras from local business media appeared almost magically. Daniel Reed was taller than Caleb expected. Early 40s, calm presence, sharp eyes that scanned, not to judge but to observe. and then his gaze stopped. On the triplets, on their hands moving in quiet conversation, on Caleb signing something that made Addison giggle. He didn't look away. Instead, he excused himself from the host mid-sentence and walked toward them. The crowd quieted, curious. Lila forced a bright smile. "Mr. Reed, what an honor." He didn't respond. He stopped directly in front of the girls. Then, without speaking a word, he raised his hands and signed. "Hello!" It was simple, clear, fluent. The world seemed to freeze. Ava gasped, silent, but her whole face lit up. Arya stepped forward instinctively. Addison clutched Caleb's leg. Daniel Reed knelt so he was at their level. "My name is Daniel," he signed smoothly. "It's very nice to meet you." The girls exploded into motion. "You sign? Where did you learn? Do you know funny stories?" Caleb felt something in his chest crack open. He hadn't realized how hungry they were to see someone powerful speak their language. Daniel laughed, not with sound but with his eyes. "I had a brother," he signed. "He taught me." Lila stood frozen, her champagne glass trembling slightly. Several guests stared in confusion, unable to follow. Daniel glanced up at Caleb. "You're their father?" "Yes," Caleb signed, voice thick. Proudly. "You've done well," Daniel replied. It wasn't polite praise. It was recognition. Then Daniel stood and faced the growing audience. And for the first time he spoke aloud. "I see some of you looking uncomfortable." A few guests shifted. "These young ladies are not limited," he continued calmly. "The only limitation in this space is ignorance." The words landed hard. Lila flushed. "No one is being ignorant." Daniel turned to her gently. "You spoke to them without making the smallest effort to include them." Her mouth opened, closed. He continued. "Communication is not the responsibility of the disabled alone. It belongs to all of us." Silence. Powerful, heavy, transformative. Then he did something no one expected. He addressed the entire crowd in sign language and spoke at the same time. "I built my company on accessibility," he said, hands moving fluidly, "because my brother once sat in a room like this and felt invisible." The girls watched him like he was a superhero. "I won't allow that invisibility here." Cameras clicked faster now, but the mood had shifted. This wasn't spectacle. It was awakening. Daniel turned back to the girls. "Would you like to show everyone something?" he signed. They looked at Caleb. He nodded. Ava stepped forward first, then Arya, then Addison. Together, they signed a short poem they had learned at school about strength in silence, about listening with the heart, about voices that don't need sound. Daniel voiced it aloud for the crowd. By the time they finished, more than one person was wiping away tears, including Caleb, including, reluctantly, Lila. When the applause came, it wasn't polite. It was thunderous. And for once it wasn't pity. It was respect. Later, as the sun dipped low over the lake, Daniel stood beside Caleb. "You ever consider advocacy work?" he asked. Caleb chuckled softly. "I'm just a mechanic. You're a father who refused to let the world shrink his children." Daniel replied. "That's leadership." 3 months later, Caleb received an offer. Community Outreach Director for a new accessibility initiative under Reed Technologies. Flexible hours, full benefits, resources for deaf education programs nationwide. He almost said no, until Ava signed, "You help more kids like us." He accepted. At the next reunion, things were different. Guests greeted the girls with clumsy but sincere signs. Lila approached them, not with mockery but with a quiet, awkward attempt at hello. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Caleb watched his daughters laugh beneath strings of warm lights, hands dancing in confident conversation with executives, cousins, strangers. The world hadn't become kinder overnight, but it had shifted because one man refused to be ashamed, because 3 girls refused to be silent, and because a wealthy CEO remembered what it felt like to be unseen and chose to speak, with his hands instead of his status. That night, as Caleb tucked the girls into bed, Ava touched his cheek. "Dad," she signed slowly, thoughtfully. "Today was loud." He smiled. "Good loud?" She nodded. "The kind you can feel." Caleb turned off the light. In the quiet darkness, surrounded by the steady rhythm of his daughter's breathing, He understood something he hadn't before. Silence had never been their weakness. It had always been their power. And now the world was finally beginning to listen.